Welcome everyone. We're here at CPCAB's headquarters in Boltonsborough near Glastonbury. I'm here with Jyles, who is the CEO of NCPS. I'm going to hand over to Jyles to introduce himself very shortly, but just to give our listeners some background for the two organisations. So from CPCAB, we are the Counselling and Psychotherapy Central Awarding Body. Our role is we develop qualifications in counselling and related approaches. We also quality assure those qualifications. So we don't deliver the qualifications ourselves. What we do is centres approach us, or training providers and colleges approach us to deliver the qualifications, which we then quality assure, making sure they reach the highest possible standards, which actually leads quite nicely into NCPS. Jyles, can you introduce yourself and also give us a little bit of background to NCPS?
Of course, Ren, and really nice to be here today. So the NCPS stands for National Counselling and Psychotherapy Society. So it's a lot easier just to say NCPS today.
Yeah.
So we are a professional membership body for counsellors and psychotherapists in the United Kingdom. What your listeners may not know is that counselling and psychotherapy in itself is not statutorily regulated in the UK, unlike doctors, dentists, GMC, etc. But having said that, we do have a voluntary regulation system run by the PSA, or the Professional Standards Authority. And the PSA are the people who also regulate the statutory bodies. So they regulate the GMC and the dentists and anaesthetists, etc.
Yeah.
So what that means is we have a voluntary system whereby our members, our trained and accredited counsellors, have to evidence they've got the skills and training competencies to do that role. And then we have to prove, if you like, annually to the Professional Standards Authority that we've got the systems in place to ensure that we check the training, to ensure that we make sure everyone works in an ethical way, that we have a robust complaints process. But underpinning everything is the need for public protection. Mm. So our core ethos and that of a Professional Standards Authority is public protection. Yeah. So that is about ensuring that counsellors are safe and ethical and trained to practice.
And I think that's where the two organisations and I think what prospective learners should understand is that the training that they go through initially will lead to becoming a member with somebody like NCPS. And I think that's where we're really aligned. And we sort of started working together we've worked together for many years.
Yes, absolutely.
But we started a campaign, the Human Connection campaign, a year and a bit ago. And that came about because both organisations, we're interested in producing practitioners who are safe, ethical, competent, and compassionate. And I think that's where, especially because it's not government regulated, this profession, that's really important to both organisations.
No, it is really important. And the Human Connections campaign we've been running together has been so important because all the research shows that human connection is what really drives great outcomes. And those great outcomes are either through training or when you're actually in the counselling room. So it's been an absolute pleasure working with CPCAB for the last year and a half now, trying to really push the message that human connection is an underpinning of what we do. Yeah. And thereby the work we've done in recognising the qualifications that CPCAB we're talking about today.
Yeah, and even as you start talking about the Human Connection campaign that we've had together, it really does tie into this new sort of venture and collaboration that we have, which is the recognition of CPCAB qualifications by NCPS, which puts a quality kite mark or a standard that is acceptable for yourselves and reassures prospective learners that they're going to undertake a qualification that is of high quality and that will mean that when they do sit in front of somebody and they are building that connection, that relationship, that they've got all the skills and experience needed to be able to do that effectively.
Absolutely. I think that's the key to why we've linked up, is we want to ensure that people do the correct training. And, part of the process of getting a recognised qualification is going through all your competencies and frameworks that you have and ensuring they meet what we require at each level, whether it's level 2, level 3 or level 4, to ensure that learners really do get a robust core training, because that's the start of anyone's journey. And a big part of our link up is that, again, as we keep talking about the human connection, ensuring that there is interaction between counsellors in person or trainees in person with each other and trainees and their tutors, as opposed to what we've seen a bit more of recently is distance learning, where there's actually no interaction. It's just a computer course. And, sadly, what people don't realize is that that's not good enough.
No.
And won't suffice.
And it's so important when you go through your counselling training to be able to understand how to build connection, how to build those relationships. And even when you're in the training space, there's skills practice, and you just can't get that on a distance learning course. And you need feedback to support your skills development when you're training. And if you're doing a distance learning course where you get issued a book, I'm sure that there's other professions, like being a mechanic, for instance. You can learn so much from the book, but then trying to put that into practice can be quite difficult. And that's with a machine. So with humans,
the ability to have synchronous feedback, if I can put it that way, live feedback from your tutor, from your peers, to be able to practice out the skills, because, counselling, people have an idea of what it is until you're actually in the room and you're learning it, and you're learning the skills, and you want to try out those skills. And often in most counselling trainings, you do try the skills out with your peers, with a tutor watching and present, so they can give you instantaneous feedback. Oh, have you thought about this? Have you tried that? And I think the other key, but from a sort of ethical point of view, we want people to know is that if you've done a distance learning course, it's not good enough to get on the accredited register. So we see it many times that people come to us and we've done distance learning and we've spent lots of money on, and we have to sadly turn around and say, I'm sorry, it's not good enough, because we need to have seen face-to-face or certainly synchronous learning.
Yeah, and on a daily basis, we get many learners that have done counselling skills courses at level 2, counselling theory courses at level 3, and it's all done distance learning, and they just haven't got the skills experience to be able to progress to that gateway qualification at level 4. Which actually, if we sort of take a step backwards with the current collaboration, where NCPS have recognised the level 2 and level 3 qualifications that with CPCAB, I think it's really it's a key indicator of quality, because there are so many distance learning courses, but not just distance learning courses. I must say, there's other qualifications out there. And certainly if I was a learner, one of the things I would be asking is how much face-to-face, how much in-person, if it's online, contact are you getting with your peers and also with your tutor?
Absolutely. I think that all those questions are valid, their contact. But I think the other thing for people to really look at, and I think you used the word kite mark earlier, but has it been kite mark? So having a course, going to a course at a training centre, which is CPCAB in its own right, is a fantastic thing, because CPCAB is a predominant awarding body in the profession and has got a great reputation. But having the additional kite mark of an accredited register program or a professional membership body like ourselves, having checked and gone through that in a very rigorous manner to ensure that all the key competencies that we would expect to see at level 2 or level 3 are in there, is just giving further assurance to people doing their training, I think.
Yeah, because people spend a lot of money, and then they get to a point where they want to go to that level 4 qualification, and they have to start again. And that's a really difficult message to give to somebody. So part of the reason for doing a podcast like this is to make that more explicit and say, actually, if you do distance learning qualifications, it is not going to give you enough skills and experience to be able to get onto an NCPS register.
Absolutely. And even before you get onto the register, it may not give you enough to get onto a level 4 course. So in the journey, you do your level 2, then level 3, and then level 4. And level 4 is a course which has the skills and competencies to get you onto our accredited register.
Yeah.
And I was only at a conference the other day with a very person who was very upset. They had done distance learning level 2 and level 3, spent lots of money, and was going around trying to get a level 4 course, and colleges were saying no because there'd been no interaction, no synchronous learning.
Yeah.
And it's so key that we get that message out to people.
Yeah, and coming back to the sort of the types of recognition for the level 2 and level 3, it's a recognized qualification. For the level 4, it's a recognized professional qualification. So I think that it would probably be good to go into understand a little bit more about why that's so important. We've mentioned a couple of things around there being the human connection and relationship. Is there anything else that you can think of that would suggest the high quality sort of industry standard that NCPS are looking for?
Yeah, of course. So with the level 4, so when you want to join an accredited register, become an accredited registrant under the PSA system, you need to have done a level 4, but it also needs to now map to something called scoped, the scope of education and practice. And scope's been a groundbreaking project between 6 professional bodies, and we account for around 80, maybe 90,000 counsellor psychotherapists in the UK, of trying to standardize our training requirements. So we standardized it into columns, but the easiest one for people to understand, there's column A, which is entry onto an accredited register. There's a series of skills and competencies you have to achieve to standardize it.
Yeah.
And part of what we've done with CPCAB and their level 4 is mapped all those training standards onto CPCAB's training, or rather CPCAB have done it. We haven't done it. CPCAB have evidence that they map all those trainings. So we can be assured that anyone who's done a CPCAB level 4 training has mapped and trained in all the competencies required and skills required to get onto the accredited register. Yeah. So it's almost a direct route onto the register. You won't need to prove anything else, as it were.
Yeah. And having, as a prospective learner or somebody wanting to start their journey in qualifying as a counsellor, it's so important to understand that you've got all the skills necessary to sit in front of somebody, because it is such a privileged position to be able to counsel somebody else. And it always sort of astounds me to some extent that if you're doing qualifications that don't put you in a situation where you are face to face, or where you are in person with somebody, or doing that synchronous engagement, you really are not going to be in the right space to be able to support somebody else in that when you go out and you start practicing.
Absolutely. It's so key that you learn to be, in the industry we call it in the room, but you learn to be in the room with your client. And nowadays that can be online as well, because a lot of counselling is online, but you have to learn to be in the room with the client to understand their body language, to understand it, but also in the training, to be willing to hear feedback. Because a big part of counselling is, as people progress into their career, is you always have to have supervision. And you've got to be willing to go to your supervisor, talk about your clients, and take on feedback. And I think that the ability to hear feedback from your tutors, to learn as you go whilst you're going through the level 2, level 3, and level 4 is so key. Because as quite right as you say, imagine if someone has just read a book and they've spent hours reading this book, and they're going to say, right, I'm a trained counsellor now, but they've never actually practiced that skill. It doesn't make any sense to me.
And it's such a great point, the point that you make around feedback, because having taught level 2, level 3, and level 4 qualifications, level 2 is about, to some extent, unlearning how listening, because listening doesn't come, it's not an easy skill. People believe that it is, but actually to truly listen is very difficult. So there's an unlearning that needs to take place of before you can gain skills or active listening skills like open questions and when to use them and how to use them, reflection skills and when to use them and how to use them. but you need to unlearn first. So that's where that feedback is so important, because we've only got our own sort of personal experience of listening. You need something outside of yourself to be able to make you think around, like, is this effective? What are you trying to achieve? Is it useful for the other person?
Absolutely. The unlearning and then learning, if you like, of active listening is so important. And that feedback from that live feedback from a tutor. So if you're doing a skills practice at whatever level it may be, and your tutor then has the ability to show you a different way, to instantaneously say, oh, you could have tried it this way, or you could have said that. And it's just key. I can't stress it enough. And, all the research we showed, it's called common factors research, particularly out of, I think it's Norway, showing that relationship is what matters, not I'm going to use the word like modality, but not modality. Yeah. It's a relationship that you build, a rapport you build with your clients. And that is why it's so important during your training. You're learning how to build that rapport. Because as you say, having a chat with a friend is very different to being in a therapy room, actively listening, reflecting, etc., with your client.
Yeah, I think the research is so clear that if you don't have that connection or that relationship, and if you start to break down what a relationship is, especially when clients are sometimes quite vulnerable or really struggling with situations that they're in, you need that element of trust. You need to understand how to build trust. You need to understand how to show that you are listening, how to be empathic, how to be compassionate. Those are all qualities that sort of underlie skills, but they're informed by those skills, and they've sort of bring those qualities to the fore. So it's very difficult to believe that you can read something and truly experience what it's like to offer that to somebody else.
Well, I think the easy answer to that is we don't think you can.
Yes.
So, and we're not alone. So all the professional bodies, certainly when I talked about the SCOPED partnership or SCOPE partnership, the 6 professional bodies, we all expect training to be in the room and not all online, or direct learning. It's got to be, and so we're not alone in that. And it's sort of an industry standard that, you've got to do training which is synchronous or in the room.
Yeah. And I think that that's the crux of it. So I think for prospective learners to understand is that to be able to be proficient in your profession and to be a professional counsellor, or you need to really have put in the training to put yourself in that position where you can support people. So, and between the two organizations, that's what this collaboration is about. This collaboration is about supporting somebody into this journey to become a counsellor, knowing that at the end they can join an organization like yourselves and have all the necessary skills and experience. And I don't know, is there any sort of last thought?
Yeah, and I think it's ensuring that people are going to practice safely and ethically. And, for us and my organisation, we're passionate about what we do. We're passionate about the absolutely positive outcomes that counselling and psychotherapy can provide. But we're also passionate about public protection, ensuring that if we're putting our stamp onto a counsellor or psychotherapist, we know they've done the training. We know they've done the synchronous training. We know they've had live feedback. We know they've had skills practice. And they're not just coming, as we keep saying, coming off a book. And that is really key. And I think the joy of linking up with CPCAB is the work we've done in sort of auditing might be the wrong word, but going through your training, we know you are giving your learners those skills and those abilities and those opportunities to learn and practice. So when they do come and do their level 4, and then they do want, if they want to apply to our organisation, I've got to say, people can apply to any of the accredited registers. We don't force them to apply to ours, but if they decide to apply to ours, we know they've done the training. We know they've done the SCOPED or SCOPE training. They meet all those competencies and skills. They've had in the room feedback. They've had summative and formative feedback. They've done a placement when it's at level 4. Yeah. And they've done over 100 hours of placement with as a trainee. So when we give them that stamp, we know that we can, say, yep, they've done the training and they're ready to go.
Yeah. What I really liked about what you were saying and sort of describing our qualifications so eloquently, so thank you for that.
Pleasure.
Was the passion that both organisations have to moving our profession forward in making it professional, essentially. And one of the things that sort of comes to mind is, and that I want to reassure sort of prospective learners of, is that part of that quality assurance is that we're an organisation run by counsellors for counsellors. We only specialise in counselling and psychotherapy qualifications. And when centres or training centres or colleges sign up to run our qualifications, they have got a real bedrock of skills, experience that supports them in running those qualifications and delivering that qualification effectively. Most of our staff are counsellors, so we have trained or delivered our qualifications. So we really do come from a place where we'd like to think that we have got a fairly good idea of what's expected to create a competent, compassionate practitioner who is ethical and safe.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more, and I, ditto for our organisation. But we always say, we're as an organisation here for our members, but we're here for the public, and we talk about passion. We are passionate because we know that good counselling psychotherapy can have life-changing impacts to people in their lives, and the underpinning of that is to ensure the training is good or exceptional. And I think that when we did our work on assessing and going through your competencies and your award, it was clear that you have that. You have all the boxes ticked, all the training there, but also it's been very clear from work we've done together of the passion we share. So the Human Connections campaign we've both run is not about our organizations. We're not doing it because we want to say, hey, come and look at NCPS or CPCAB. We're doing it because we're passionate about people realizing the importance of human connection. And that's the whole crux of it. And so the shared passion, but I think the shared passion, but the shared knowledge that we're both very professional, that, we are here to ensure people get the correct training.
Yeah.